that sort of gash in the earth carved by ancient glaciers. You know, amongst these towering trees, nowhere to run, and you're faced with seemingly a bottomless lake, that will make you feel very small.
More than 50 years ago, Lake Crescent gave up something she had been hiding for years. When this body surfaced, so did a mystery.
The body had been down in this cold, cold, cold water, untouched, wrapped up, no eyes, just a skull.
It was more or less a whodunit crime novel from the 1920s that had just come to life.
Right now, you're reading in your newspapers and hearing over your radios about a murder. They call it the case of the lady in the lake.
The reality is that Hallie Illingworth was murdered by...
This case has a lot of really high strangeness aspects. She comes up with her hand out of the water. I'm here.
It would have scared the hell out of me seeing a hand sticking up out of the water.
Oftentimes, spirits get trapped because they have unfinished business. Certainly, if someone was murdered and their body was thrown in the lake, that's pretty unfinished business.
Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Hurt with the NRW, where nerds rule the world, and I am here with Ryan, and I'm hoping I'm saying this right. Grulich? Ryan Grulich? Ah, yes. I'm so bad with names. I've been trying. Who directed the 2023 documentary of The Lady of the Lake, a true crime-esque paranormal documentary about a 1937 murder that has led to ghost sightings in oh my goodness, I just forgot the lake. Which lake is it? Lake Cascades?
Lake Crescent.
Crescent. Oh, I swear I watched it. I swear. So how are you today, Ryan? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm doing very well, thank you. It is 40-something degrees here in Orlando, Florida, where I'm currently living, and that's really cold for here. But I am still Pacific Northwest blood, so for me, this is good. But yeah, it's good. I think the one thing I just want to say, though, is that the Cascades are, just to give you a bonus point, a mountain range in Washington.
I knew the Cascades was a word there, but I couldn't remember yet. So the lake is between the Cascades and the other mountain range, which I also cannot remember the name of, right? It's
on
like
the Olympics.
The Olympic. Yes. See, I know it. I can show that I barely watched it. I'm just kidding. I really watched it. It was a really great documentary. And honestly, we've done a couple of more indie style documentaries here. And this one actually blew me away. I was like, I was expecting something. I know this is an awful thing to say to the director. I apologize. I was expecting like a very low budget kind of story about this, and it was incredible. Like I was like blown away by the production quality of this documentary. And I know that I know that kind of sounds horrible, but I actually mean it in a very, very, very polite way. The movie was beautiful. And it tells an incredible story about Hallie. And so can you tell me how you were brought to her story about this incredible, awful murder?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for saying those nice things. And the group of people that worked on the film with me are all super talented. And we've been in stagecraft of a bunch of different types my entire career. So this is my first feature film as a director, but I've produced stuff for everybody from Amazon to Nintendo to Meta to, I'm just more of usually a gun for hire. And so this time we made a story that was relevant to us because we were about to shoot a horror film in 2020, and funding got pulled, insurance got pulled when COVID hit, everything just kind of fell apart. And we decided that we could make a documentary with a smaller crew. I had been told this story by a friend about Hallie's murder and the condition of her body years ago, and it just always stuck with me. I'm a big Lynch fan, Twin Peaks, that kind of stuff, and it had a very Laura Palmer kind of vibe to me. And so as I started to dig into Hallie's story, I learned about these things that were going on out there still today, which I'm kind of an enthusiast around some of the strange and unusual stuff that's in that film, and just started digging. And I met Amanda Paulson when I was looking for someone to kind of be in front of the camera because I had no interest in it. But she went on the journey and pulled up her own, story, really, as you saw, and it was a real treat to be able to watch somebody go through it. And we found some interesting things. The thing I want to say to you, if you like ghost hunting shows, I've never seen one, ever. So I know that this looks different because I've seen clips, but I've never watched an entire episode of a ghost hunting show. So I wanted to do the opposite of that, and not because I have like a complex around it, but because as a artist, I guess is the word I would use loosely, I wanted to see something more beautiful. I think that it's cheap a lot of times, and not just from a production value, but we dehumanize victims in true crime. We dehumanize spirits in these paranormal shows. And so I think that part of the beauty of this project was literally just not doing that. And that really kind of brought this story to life the way we saw it. Hey,
I'm sorry, my cat had to get in the way there.
That's your executive assistant.
Got two of them. They're a mess. And that's you actually. And Amanda actually goes into that at the end. She really talks about how this was a very different journey because she is actually a paranormal investigator. Correct?
Yeah, she is. And when I first met her, I think she was really focused on ghost hunting, in the very traditional sense of it, which is one of the things that I found interesting about her. And as she went through this journey in her own life, this process took several years. And I think she said it to me before, right? Like you're going through tons of stuff over the space of years. But while she was doing that, this story was still, a part of her life. And I think that we talk about story a lot, but it influences how we perceive things like the paranormal. It influences how we perceive ourselves, these stories we tell ourselves. So it was interesting to see her. And if you don't follow Amanda Paulson at Pretty Effin' Spooky, you really should, if you're into the supernatural or paranormal stuff at all, because she's really like par excellence in that space, in my opinion.
Noted, definitely, for sure. She has a good presence, and you could tell that she was really getting emotional about the story, especially towards the end where she couldn't tell who she was actually talking to. And I want to talk about that. I don't want to go into spoilers, of course, because I do really think that people should watch this documentary. It was incredible, and most of it's historical. Joking about the ghosts a little bit. At the end, that was your voice, right? You were the one asking the questions. Was that you?
Yeah.
How was that? So if you haven't seen a ghost hunting show, and I'm sure you were introduced to the tools before, though. If you haven't seen a ghost hunting show, how did you feel interacting, especially on camera at that point?
Channeling is not something that's unfamiliar to me. The intervention of the technology, using like the spirit box and the Estes method, which we talk about, that we were using there. I had never done that. When Amanda first was going to do it on camera, I wanted to try it to understand the technology. And I don't know if people know how this works. You can Google it, but summarily, you have noise canceling headphones on. Someone's asking you questions. You're listening to this feedback loop. You're blindfolded. And out of this scanning of a radio stations, essentially you're picking out words that you think you hear and just saying them. Now, they may not be in response to a question. I may ask you, did you die here? And you say 7. And that seems to be what a lot of people experience with it. When I tried it, I put the headphones on, I blinded myself. I thought, and this was like on set, and I thought for just a second, like, are you hearing me? Is something here? And I swear to God, through that static, I just heard, yep. And I pulled them off and handed them to Amanda. And I said, hey, this is your deal. And so for me, there was like a validation moment. Like, people can accept that or not. I really don't talk about it a ton, but like for the technology there's a validation moment. So once belief becomes involved and you can accept that something may be happening here, that there may be something that we're communicating with, whether it's a reflection of ourselves or a dead relative or, capital G God, whatever, we're talking to something. Once you believe that, The questions were fairly organic, and we just kind of went the way we went. And if you watch the film, everything that we were doing in those interviews was shot on one camera intentionally so that there weren't cutaways. We edited for time, and most of it is pretty close to linearly how the discussion went. But yeah, it was a pretty weird experience for me. And I will tell you that the most compelling bit of evidence personally, right? Because I think so much of this is about us. It's not something, it's like you're never going to like grab a ghost and take it home and show it to your friends. You know, the UFO is never going to be in your yard parked. You know, these things that we're chasing specters, but you grow through it. So for me, one of the things that was most compelling out of the Estes method was I would have, like most good interviewers like you, probably a list of 5 to 10 questions. As I was asking question number 1, whatever answers were coming out from wherever, let's just say, they would answer question number 2 or 3. And this continued to happen where I would ask a question and then something would be said that was basically a corollary to an answer like later down. And so there was this sort of non-linear way of communication with whatever was going on there that really stuck out to me as suggestive of intelligence. And that, we don't even talk about that in the film, but like that was shocking to me.
Were you a believer before? I'm not saying that you are a believer now, but were you a believer before and it kind of trickled into you a little bit more?
I guess I'm a little bit of a knower because I've seen something. And so, but in the sense that I know that there's more than me here, or if it is just me, I'm able to like make things appear or something, you know? What this did was reinforce the interest in the mystery. That's what it did for me.
That's fair. When she was saying that when Amanda was saying she couldn't tell who she was talking to, I was just like, all right, what else is going on? And y'all do go into it. And I do want to talk more about the crime because in reality, one big element that y'all did talk about is that behind all of these devastating ghost stories that we love to kind of evangelize, however you say that. I'm bad with English. I'm going to pretend I'm good with English today. We like to share. We like to enlarge the lore and the mythos. They all have a true story in their heart, and we have Hallie's in this one. So to talk about that a little bit, what was it like doing research on even though she is one of many in this lake? What was it like doing the research for such a relatively small murder in the middle of almost nowhere, this small town?
Yeah, it's a really big question. Hallie Latham, or Hallie Illingworth, came out of Kentucky, and she went from Kentucky to the Dakotas and from the Dakotas to Washington. This was pre-internet, pre-commonplace car ownership, pre-easy access flights. That's a big life. The fact that she ended up where she ended up, going all that way, literally when you go to Port Angeles, which is the closest town to this lake, you stand in the town center and you look across the water and you see a landmass and it's Canada. So this is about is the northwesternmost point of the United States. And she had come from very far away, so it had to be the edge of the world. I try to keep that in perspective first when I'm talking about Hallie. She was an adventurer. She was somebody who did all of this on her own. She had been married a total of 3 times, which was very atypical back in that day. She drank, she cussed, she fought, she smoked. She was her own person. And I think to that extent, we fail usually when knowing who a person was that we are attaching some sort of entity to first. And then in terms of the murder, you know, it was really painful. We could have made this movie a lot longer. You know, when the body was found in Lake Crescent with its hand sticking up out of the water, literally like this, which is almost like physically, it's not impossible, obviously, because it happened, but it's really bizarre. Normally you'd be lying prone, face down, or on your back up, you know, but she was floating, nothing tethering her down, and the fisherman found her with her hand up out of the water. It's really bizarre. Lady of the Lake archetype starts right there. But when they found her, they didn't know who she was. They didn't have DNA. The way she gets identified, we'll leave to the film. But the point is, and we don't even talk about this because we didn't really have time. Again, we could have made it a much longer movie. There was an exhaustive search for who she was. And one of the things that they did was there was a lumber, I believe, timber magnate who was from Northern California, who had a botanist, college-educated botanist daughter, who's also atypical at this point in time. And she had gone up to this area in the Olympic National Forest to explore and catalog and do these types of things, and gone missing. And so everybody really wanted it to be this girl. And there's all this coverage about how it's this, well-to-do girl, educated, so on and so on. And they're pretty convinced that it might be her, and they're looking for every reason to justify it, even though there was physical evidence that was against it. It was really bizarre. But little old Hallie, and the fact that she was a part of that little old small town, okay, those things may seem smaller, but, huge ripples in that city. And this story, in fact, competed for World War II with headlines in LA. I mean, like there was a giant, dynamic here that came out, but that community was hit in the way a bomb would have hit a larger community. You didn't have murders there. There had been, at this point, I believe, something like 3 murders in the past 7 to 10 years out there. And so this was very novel to them. And so I think the community was trying to reconcile from the violence as much as Hallie's family was. And so to learn about all of this really just sort of reinforced to me how distant we've become from each other, and how even though we have all of these like gadgets and we have all of this information, we have very little wisdom. And I think that now the fact that we could identify Hallie so much quicker wouldn't necessarily equate to us caring anymore. And I think that was sort of one of the things that I took away.
That's an interesting way to put it. And I even said it, this is a considerably small murder compared to what, we see it today. We see a lot of true crime documentaries that are about these just grandiose, like making these murderers superstars, and we are reducing the victims. We are doing a whole bunch of terrible things. But I do think, to credit, and I've actually said this in a couple of documentaries for those of you out here, for those of you in the audience out there, it's really great to see stories dive in on the victim, which y'all did beautifully. This was Hallie's story. There was nobody else. Her husband deserved a lot worse than he got. But let's be fair. Men out there, y'all a bit privileged. Just gonna say it. So then let's drive a little bit at that history. Y'all had so much of the history then, and you did talk about it briefly about how you didn't want it to necessarily be a paranormal documentary. So why kind of do a half-half? Why kind of remove some of that history and add a little bit more of that paranormal?
Well, that was where the story went. So if you're making a documentary, you always have the choice of sculpting the story. But I felt like Hallie's story didn't end at her ultimate internment at the cemetery in Vancouver, by where her family is. I don't think her story ended there, right? I think her story took a different shape over the years. And in Port Angeles, specifically, she became almost like an archetype. The murder case is tragic for sure, but it reminds me of the banality of evil. And it's a comment that you'll hear a lot, where it's like generally like, even in the most evil situations on planet Earth that you can think of, mass evil, right? World War II type evil. There's accountants that are measuring everything. There's people that are reporting on it. There's all of these little machinations of the banality of evil. And my assistants are barking.
That's all right.
but yeah, so like taking that stuff in was really like challenging for me. And so how to talk about it, I kind of just wanted people to see it instead of like telling them about it. And I think that her story really took shape over time in a way because people don't want to deal with the banality of evil. So they're trying to kind of reconcile that in their own community. And that's really where a lot of these stories came from that we then pursued, which took this second, half, really is kind of like 2/3 of the film. But, it is the paranormal part of this is equally Hallie's story. And it's maybe ambitious, but my hope is that after this, she'll be hedging towards being more remembered as this archetype of this woman in white who's out by the lake haunting people and just being a murder victim.
That's fair. It's a nice way to shift her story. All right.
It is her story. That's what I'm saying. Like,
okay. So adjust her story so that she can own it, so it can be hers again.
Yeah.
So, is that a better?
I felt like we were just pointing a camera at it. Like, it's already happening.
There you go. Perfect.
Yeah. Maybe just providing an amplifier.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's you have those stories everywhere. There's I'm from a small town in North Texas, and we had our lady in white too at Lake Worth, and it's one of those.
Eagle Mountain Lake.
Okay. All right. I'm from North Dallas, so I get you. All right. Sorry, talking too much. My final question for a lot of true crime actually for all true crime documentarians nowadays, because I had a wonderful answer about the fandom that has circled, that has kind of, gone up and decided that it's going to be a bigger thing. How do you feel about what is called fandom around true crime? And depending on your answer, I'll explain why. But what do you feel about people just fanning and fangirling and all these things around murderers and murders?
Yeah, so it's, first of all, I have an 18-year-old daughter. The idea of something happening to her is incredibly scary to me. What we're afraid of, we tend to want to sample, This is the same thing with horror films, and I'm a very big horror person. If you haven't checked out my company, Creepy Kingdom, we deal with a lot of horror stuff. The fetishization of serial killers and murderers is just, it made sense to me when I was like 16, and I was very curious about like these types of psychology, and looking at abnormally functioning people. But to have it be a pop culture fascination doesn't really surprise me, because we live in this age of like constant disruptive novelty where everything's upside down land. But at no point did I want to contribute to fetishizing a killer, and I never would. But people are absolutely welcome to their own opinion. Maybe we're all just traumatized and stuck at 16 years old, so we have to keep, reliving this stuff to try to get our minds wrapped up for the maturity to come. But in general, I like to watch stories about, I like the true crime stories that focus on people. And that could be the killer, I think we're all interested in people stories. I can't say that I'm like super invested in true crime. I don't know that I'll ever make another true crime piece. Like, this was like an accidental, this should have been a 3-part horror film that got the plug pulled on it. And we made a true crime doc that really mattered to us. And we kept going with it because the story kept getting deeper and stranger, as these stories do. So I'm not the best person to ask that question, but I will tell you that the fetishization of killers is something that's super perverse to me. It doesn't make sense.
Fair. That's fair. I had a documentarian, and to be fair, you are a documentarian, even if it's just this one film. Yeah. But it's I had an interesting one 2 years ago where she absolutely laid into me that she hated it. She hates the concept, even though she is actually a true crime documentarian. She's like, I hate it. It's it's great to love history. It's great to learn about people, but don't be in love with it. You shouldn't have conventions about this. Like and I was just like, okay, now I'm curious about other people's feelings.
Well, I would never. First of all, no shade right here, but I would never tell anybody what to do with themselves.
That's fair. That's fair.
It's just my style. But I haven't been to a true crime conference, so I don't know. I get the feeling we might be asked to do some of that stuff. It's kind of been in the works. And if you have those sorts of strong opinions, I always advocate for telling them to as many people as you can. So, I think what we have to do as people who make art is just consistently try to raise the bar on ourselves to communicate whatever it is that's the most alive inside of us. And a film is just like a very long snapshot of that usually. And then just if the audience, resonates with it, great. If they don't, you just keep making stuff. And I feel like I've pretty well communicated the big takeaways for me on this one, that just kind of shaped how, if I were to make another true crime doc, I would definitely be looking at this intersection of like the occult and true crime. Because there's a lot of it. There really is. And I found that fascinating.
And it's really great. I apologize for taking up so much of your time, Ryan, but I really enjoyed the documentary. It was wonderful. The Lady of the Lake is available on digital. Please go check it out. It is wonderful. Learn Hallie's story. She deserves that. Thank you so much for your time. And for all of y'all out there, like, subscribe, share. Ryan, where can they follow you too?
Yeah, you can follow Creepy Kingdom on all the different platforms. And we have an Instagram for the film as well as a website. The website is deathiswithme.com. And you can find all of the links there too, I think, that you need. But Creepy Kingdom on all the social media handles will get you to all the stuff we're doing.
Perfect. All right. Thank you guys. And y'all have a wonderful day. We'll see y'all soon.
Pleasure chatting with you. Love to all my nerds who rule the world.
Yeah. Nerds rule the world.
Yes, we do.
Thanks. Nerds rule the world. Thank you.
I love the nerds ruling the world. So more power to you.
Patrick, what up, man? And yes, they do. Nerds rule the world, kid.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Awesome. Kuya P, nerds rule the world. Hello.
Yes, they do.
Yes.
Oh,
nerds rule the world.
I got.
It's in the title of your show, like nerds rule the world. Like I want more black weirdos on screen, and I don't feel like we ever get to see that very much.
Thank you so much. Nerds do rule the world.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, nerds rule.
Love it. It's your boy Kuya P, nerds rule the world. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you.
They rule the world, all right.
Yes. Take care, Tony. Thank you, guys.